Okay, so sorry for the late start, everybody. I'm not going to talk much. I'm just going to introduce our first speaker, who's Deborah Topper. She was a professor at College of Staten Island, CUNY, so she's one of our colleagues, and now she's Professor Emeritus.
Yes.
She has retired. And she's going to talk a little bit about a couple of different topics, and then introduce our two other speakers. Okay.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a sort of interesting spot for me. I went to school there back, I just said it was probably somewhere in 1960 or so. I was in high school right there. It was a high school. I think it isn't. It isn't anymore. It hasn't been forever. And then moving on in my career in life, we went to graduate school together, in fact. So, and I have to tell you, I am much older than him. Okay, he didn't go to high school back in that, and he wasn't in junior high school in that particular era. So one of the things he had suggested I talk a little bit about is my own career, and one of the first things I usually want to tell students about my own career is that it took me a while to find geography. Okay, and that it is something that finding your way to a career, for some people, you know, they know when they're 5 what they're going to do, and other people struggle a little bit harder, or maybe not even struggle, but it takes a bit. So I went to a college that had no geography. I never thought of going and becoming a geographer until. And in fact, I went and got a library degree, so I have a library degree somewhere along the line as well. And I stayed home and raised children and thought that was what I was doing, as well as going and getting a library degree and working as a librarian, until my husband, who teaches in the planning department at Rutgers, took that job, and that particular department was sort of in a building a little bit like this, where one side of the corridor could be one department and another side of the corridor could be another department, and he was around the corner from the geographers, and his department of planning had lots of geographers. And we went to dinner at somebody's house, and I looked at the bookshelf, and I said, oh, that's really interesting. And, oh, you know, here's another book that I like to read, and here's another book, and here's another way of looking at the world. And I ended up starting graduate school at what I then thought was a very advanced age, but now I realize it was, you know, I was a young child, and went got my degree in geography, and of course I think it's the most exciting field to go into, and in large part because it's so inclusive of subjects and different things to think about, that anything I thought about as a question I could claim was geography. I could find a way to make it into geography, and that's what I liked about it. And so I spent the rest of my career being a geographer. And probably I think that, my greatest notoriety might not even be the wrong word here, was to look at the changes, the demographic, environmental, and economic changes in the Great Plains. And although I am a native New Yorker, there I was with my husband, and the two of us did this work together, looking at the sort of pressures on the American Great Plains and saying, wait a second, if we keep doing what we're doing, then we're going to continue to struggle. This is a boom and bust economy, and the busts have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so something has to change, and how can we re-envision it? And we re-envision it, the Great Plains, particularly the rural Great Plains, as one where you would see much greater emphasis on restoration ecology as its basis. And so that you would think about the native species that you could reintroduce or introduce or encourage. Think about the grasses that would keep the soils in place. And think about revaluing those things. And we wrote this in 1987. and sort of set off a whole conversation about re-envisioning that particular region, which had us playing back and forth between here and there, giving speeches, which often were speeches in which people would yell at us and say, go home, poppers. And indeed, they did. They said, go home, poppers. And don't you have enough problems where you come from that you need to, why do you need to come out here and bother us? We're doing fine. And then they would go up and say, we're not really doing fine, but we did. So that was sort of an interesting part of my career. Sort of. And then the other part, of course, has been teaching and teaching and teaching. Now, somewhere along the line, I think I have enjoyed my relationship with the organization called the American Geographical Society. And so I think you would ask me to speak a bit about that. And here's the website for them. And one of the things that I valued so much was that this was an organization which was actually one of the first geographical organizations to be willing to listen to what we had to say about the Great Plains. It was a braver organization. I'm gonna trash the AAG, which was a little bit more nervous about sort of annoying people. But the American Geographical Society wasn't. They said, okay, if that's an interesting idea, let's take it on. Let's think about it. Not that we officially endorse it, but let's think about it. Whereas I think some of the others were a little more, might annoy people. So I would say this has been a brave organization and continues to be so. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background on it. And that is, it's the oldest of the geographical societies in the United States. Started in 1851, okay? And at that time, and again, it's kept its same mission going ever since 1851, at some level, in some ways. It has been the intent of this group that started it then to bring together different groups, scholars or academics, business people, and government people, or statesmen, as I think they may have called themselves in those days. I don't know. They're not all statesmen, perhaps. So. And so bringing those groups together, and I think in 1851 it was very much a sense of putting a group of, quite clearly elites into a room together to talk about the issues of the day. And certainly geographical issues were very, very clearly recognized as tremendously important. That is, sort of 1851, the mapping, just this straightforward knowing what this country looked like as you went out west they were not too clear. So you had all sorts of expeditions that were sent out. And American Geographical Society supported many of those expeditions, in fact. It was polar expeditions were, again, another tremendous interest of the organization. So supporting them, providing a venue for the people to come back and talk about them. So this was a group you could think of as coming together and thinking about those things. Again, what were those natural resources? There was, it was a very clear notion that natural resources were important and we better know what we have. They were instrumental in coming up with the route for the first transcontinental railroad. Again, I think the first paper delivered for the society was, I think, 1863, and it was intent upon what was that route, okay? 1869 is when the first transcontinental railroad is completed. So 1863, you can thank the American Geographical Society for whatever that route is. They were instrumental in coming up with, sort of a route for the Panama Canal. So, each one of these things sort of major efforts into important kinds of decisions that needed to be made. They encouraged the building of knowledge. And they did it in numbers of ways. One, as they say, is through these various sort of meetings in which they would, the group would come and say, yes, we want to support this. We want to support Peary to go to the pole, North Pole, or whatever. Another thing that they did and that they continue to do is to offer medals that are, very, very lovely awards, a real medal, for various kinds of accomplishments. So that, again, numbers of people from early on, actually Gothel's Bridge, but also Panama Canal would have been given one. Who else would have been given? I'm thinking of going all the way through. Rachel Carson of Silent Spring, who behind the who created such a great awareness of the difficulties of DDT. She would have been given a medal much later than Goggles. But sort of year after year, or not year after year, but regularly throughout the history, the awarding to people and the recognition of the important kinds of things that they had come up with. Hugh Hammond Bennett, soil science, and very, very important. It's always important, but I think a lot of the recognition for his important work on soil science would have come during the 30s and during the Dust Bowl, where you needed to understand exactly what was going on with your soils. So that's one thing. Journals, actually. Let's see if I can. You can tell that I am not a PC user because I'm moving this very poorly. Here we go. This is another thing, and this is a sort of one. This is a gorgeous thing, if it ever comes up. No. There's an image. There's an image there that, if it comes up, it is of a globe that that's from 19. Yeah. It's okay. From 1929. It's not there. Well, yeah. You know what? It's the. Can you see it? You should be able to see the. There it is. The globe has been signed by all sorts of people, as I say, from those who have done these extraordinary explorations. So again, you would have Peary, you would have Hillary. For Everest, you would have had Shackleton for the South Pole, sort of all of them having signed it, and Neil Armstrong, sort of all of them having their signatures on this particular. Okay, so it's giving you the list, but not the image, which is aesthetically more pleasing. So another aesthetically pleasing sight. Okay. And it's continued. I would say there was a period of perhaps that the AGS was a little quieter, as its group of three, as I say, who had been working together closely, sort of went into their own silos, maybe. Sort of business people, academics, and government people perhaps not working as well, much together. Well together as much together, I think perhaps is more to the point. But I think that actually what we have, and so is a renaissance, really, of the ways in which those groups are coming together. And my fellow members of the AGS Council, there it is. You can see each one of these signatures sort of represents somebody who did something extraordinary. Probably most likely where, and we've had, continuing to have globe signings for people who continue to be those first people to a particular place or a particular accomplishment. Yeah. Maybe it's a little hard to read. So what we have done, I think it's geospatial science, which has, again, sort of reinvigorated. So our group, as I say, the two men behind me are both entrepreneurs. Okay, so I'm the academic, they are the entrepreneurs, they are moving and shaking. Okay, and they can tell you about the fabulous work that they do and the new opportunities. And again, geography as this font, really, of great new opportunities. So let me introduce, who's going first? Okay. Okay.
Quartararo.
Yeah, he's got a lot of syllables in his name, and so I frequently get, I drop on Quartararo, and it is CEO, and I'm going to blank you. Spatial is in the name of it, right? That's it. And the name of the company is, because I forget. Spatial Networks, okay? So he can tell you about his, and then following his, we have, what is it? Bitvoyant. Jared Novick at Bitvoyant. So a new company, yours is 20 years old, right?
Almost.
Almost, okay. And yours is almost a year.
Correct.
Okay. And so they can tell you about their great work, and you can, and you can start writing down all of the terms, the search terms you should be putting in when you look for jobs. Right. Okay.
Thanks, Deborah. And thanks, Alan. So again, I'm Tony Quartararo, CEO of Spatial Networks down in St. Pete, Florida. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to come part. So Alan asked kind of a little before we get into, and it's only a couple of slides. I'm not here to test your eye charts. So my background, right, so I'm a geographer by academic training. I did my undergraduate at Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania. Much like Deborah said, I didn't know that I was a geographer until my random guidance counselor going into my senior year said you need to pick a major at this point. You've taken a lot of classes. You now have a, and he's telling me this in his office, that you now have a minor in philosophy, but you don't actually have a declared major. But looking at the courses you've taken, why don't you try geography? And it was like a light bulb going off. He happened to be the geography chair of the department. That was my guidance counselor. That was rather fortuitous. So I said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do that. What kind of careers can I get in geography? And, being in rural Pennsylvania, state school, land use planning, county administration, that didn't get me excited. But I said, hey, let's do that because I got 2 semesters left and I got to get out of here in 4 years. So I did that, and then realized when I was trying to get a job in rural Pennsylvania in some sort of county mapping or GIS department or land use department that I was greatly disappointed when I started looking at student loan repayment coupons and what my salary might be. I'm going to go back to graduate school. So I took a year in between. Got accepted at Cal State Northridge, but then the earthquake happened. So this is going back to the early 90s. And out-of-state tuition in California was astronomical at the time. I don't know what it is today. But Portland State University accepted me in Portland, Oregon for a graduate program. Significantly less cost for that. I thought I could get in and out in a couple years. Ended up taking 3 years, actually never finished my master's degree. I only failed in writing the thesis. I did all the extra coursework, and 10 years later when I went back to try to finish that, they said, oh yeah, all your credits have expired and the chairs changed policy. And I said, yeah, okay, thanks, I don't actually need that now. But it's always going to remain one of those unfinished things in my life. But you know, I look back now, 20 plus years after that, and can appreciate the wisdom and of the guidance counselor that I had in steering me in that direction. He saw something in me in the courses I had naturally just kind of selected that that was actually perfect. Because today I can tell you, even if I was independently wealthy and didn't have to work, I'd be doing exactly what I do today every day, getting up in the morning, because I love what I do. So how does that book start? It was the best of times, the worst of times, right? It's a great time to be a geographer. It's a great time to be getting into the field. So how many, by a show of hands, are either already working in the geography field or soon to graduate? A year out, year and a half out, 2 years out maybe? So there's a lot out there. I've grown fond of the phrase, geography is the science of everything. Deborah sort of touched on it, but I'll be a little bit more bold in saying that there's nothing that involves the human experience that doesn't involve geography. And I challenge everybody that I talk to, I'll buy you dinner, you know, if you can tell me something that doesn't involve location, which is another way of saying geography, right? So it doesn't matter. And I've had people, you know, in the U.S. government at the federal level try to take that challenge, and you know, we peel back the onion far enough, and they have to concede. So a couple of things I was going to talk about, not to steal anything from Jared's thunder, because he's got a lot more pretty pictures than I do. I've just got a few words. So really, my focus in terms of where I see the next 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, although anybody tells you what things are going to be like in 15 years, you should be very, very skeptical of that. Because the pace of change of things in our world today, whether it's social media, whether it's technology, whether it's politics, changes so fast that, you know, the level of confidence that anybody would have beyond 5 years, maybe 10 years, starts to diminish rapidly. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things in technology, data, because that's what we do with spatial networks, and careers in general. So technology, right? So I don't know what people are focused on or interested in, at least in this department, or what you look out on the world and see. But technology is it's inseparable from the careers that you're going to face. You know, Deborah was kind of being self-deprecating about her ability to manage, you know, a laptop. That's not going to be. Nobody here in the room is going to be able to go into the workforce and not become kind of master of that domain at this point. So software engineering. That's not something that you study typically in a geography department, but if you don't understand the technology that you're going to be consuming and dealing with, you know, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. It doesn't mean I'm advocating going and becoming a software engineer. Certainly if you've got an aptitude for that, by all means do that. There's a lot of opportunities career-wise in the geospatial industry, geospatial intelligence and geospatial technologies for software engineering. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, have a career in software engineering, but you should know how to manipulate software and do the bare minimum. Visualization and design, so cartography, right? It's a beautiful art, but it's part art, part science. There's a lot of advanced technologies today and a lot of new innovative application of visualization and design. So you look at really beautiful websites and you look at the art of cartography and you combine those two together and you can clearly have a very robust career. So statistical applications, and I'm not talking, I don't like the term big data or big data science because that's again a fairly trending term and something that doesn't necessarily have staying power. But what you're talking about is statistical applications, right? So crunching numbers. So if you're good in math and you're good with manipulating data and looking at trends in a spreadsheet, that's going to find its way onto a map at some point. So better to understand that. So New York City, down on Wall Street, right? You hear about quants, you know, quantitative analysis, doing big derivatives of financial markets and commodities and futures. All of that is geographic data. Whether it's expressed in an XY coordinate or not, it's all geographic data. So if you're really good at statistics and math, there's a fairly strong market out there. A lot of people call that data science or data analytics, but it really boils down to being good at math and statistical applications. So IoT, which is Internet of Things, sensors and UAVs. So everybody, you know, is falling in love with drones. You tinker with those. There's certain restrictions, certainly in urban areas. There's an evolving map of the national no-fly zones for commercial or even recreational UAVs. But I would encourage anybody to understand what's going on in that market, because when you're able to map things at a very, very large scale, again, but in a postage stamp size of geography, but it gives you access to things that even 5, 10 years ago were only available if you paid thousands of dollars for a commercial imagery scene. But Internet of Things, right? So your refrigerators, you see ads on TV for refrigerators that have cameras on the inside that are telling you don't have any more milk, and then we'll send you a text message, or aside from the marketing, right? And I can't imagine ever buying one of those, but all of those things, appliances, your vacuum cleaner, your Roomba that cleans your floor automatically, all of those things are part of the Internet of Things, and they're all connected, they're all communicating to one another, and they're all going to be, growing, but they, the law of gravity still exists. They exist on a place on the earth at a point in time. Where those things are, where, if you're looking at retail markets, where are those things being sold, what are they communicating, how are they communicating, and where's the growth going to be in the Internet of Things, as well as sensors, right? Jared can maybe touch on some of those. If I know where he's going with that, I'll leave that to him. So video and image exploitation. So everybody's seen what Google Street View is. You can literally kind of walk down or preview a street, but that's not digital video. That's actually millions and millions and millions of digital stills that are coordinated with a overlap to make it look like a video. But there's coming, the ability to do digital video from mobile devices or capture video and understand that. But it's not just the video at a place and time that's interesting. It's the exploitation of those things. So street signs, manhole covers. There's a white Toyota Land Cruiser parked outside of a particular address with a license plate that's an out-of-state license plate. That's interesting. What do we know about that vehicle from another state, right? So there's lots of things you can extract out of video in real time or post-processing, as well as image exploitation. So digital stills, whether from a UAV drone to an iPhone or something like that. So that's the technology. It is going to continue to change at a rate of change that is breathtaking, right? So it continues to defy Moore's law in terms of the half-life of technology and the exponential growth of that, and we're really only starting to see the tip of the iceberg. Data. There's the internet, right? So you hear a lot about geospatial data and open source information online, whether it's geo-rectified tweets, posts from Twitter and from Instagram and Facebook that when you check in at a certain place, they're all free. We were just kind of commiserating before we get started about all the data that people voluntarily put out there, right? And then it's directly at odds with the expectation of being private, because you're not private anymore if you're voluntarily submitting all that information. Yes, that's a private company, commercial company, not the government. We're not here to have that conversation, but you're still voluntarily putting information out there that describes your pattern of life every single day. Where do you stop? Where's the Starbucks that you stop? How long do you stop for? And then they have that commercial transaction information. So all of this cloud of information that is geographic in nature is available for everybody else on the internet to have access to. Don't be deceived in thinking that it's private. It's not. But if you're into data science and you're into data collection and you're into analysis, the internet is the single biggest database that there is about information that's geospatial and information that's out there that lacks an expressed geographic information data type, but you can then resolve that. There's a company, I don't even know if it's a company, actually it's a group called Bellingcat. You can look them up, bellingcat.com. They've gotten a lot of press doing some open source research to resolve Russian airstrikes in Aleppo for the MH17 aircraft that was downed over Ukraine by just geo-rectifying open source photos and videos that are put out there by people, whether it's a Russian soldier or whether it's a dissident, and then putting that all on a map and then writing an analytical product out there. That sector of the industry that uses geography is going to explode in the next 10 years, mark my word. So derivative, composite, so what you typically think of as point and polygon analysis when you're working in GIS, you're finding the best location for the new fire tower and ranger station at a state park. That goes way back 25 years. That was one of my exercises in the GIS lab that everybody had to go through, right? So you're taking multiple layers of data, you're trying to solve a problem, right? So derivative and composite types of data sources that are unknown today and not available today, but somebody in this room may go out and create a data set that then creates, the next Uber or the next, Airbnb type of service for the sharing economy, if you will. And then historical, all the legacy data that's all, in the Library of Congress, here in the university, here in the city of New York, to current, what's being done right now, and mapping that, and then predictive, right? So taking all that data, the legacy and historical, and mashing it together and saying, this is what's going to happen. The last 20 times that this particular thing has happened, this has happened. So I'm going to make a predictive algorithm and a predictive model that I can display on a map that's going to give confidence to people making decisions. So last slide, or second to last slide, really. So careers, right? So when I was thinking about coming and talking today, and where I was when I started in the postgraduate work, and thinking how much things have changed in the last 20 years, and where we are today, 2016, where things are going to be in the next 5, not to mention the next 20. Human geography tops the list for me. I've grown to appreciate human geography, and again, the colloquial definition of human geography is simply why people do what they do where they do it, right? So that encompasses every aspect of your life as a human being, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, from birth till death. So there's a lot under there, and I'm not intending to unpack all that. We can certainly sidebar after we're all done talking, but the next thing that is certainly a part of human geography, right, so everything else falls under human geography, is geopolitical risk. And I didn't load that up because of the events in the last week and a half, but it is a global issue that is not going away anytime soon. Whether it's in Aleppo, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Russia, India, South America, the border region of the United States and Mexico with narco-trafficking, geopolitical risk is here to stay. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to be left behind. Energy, water, and agriculture, right? So we all need energy to power whatever it is we're going to use, whether it's our cars, whether it's our home, whether it's our laptop, an iPhone. How we get the energy, that's one thing, right? But there's opportunities out there for geographers in the energy markets, not just oil and gas, not just solar, not just water, but all the above. Water, in terms of it's a finite resource on the planet. Wars have been started over it. There's countries out there today with stated military policies that say if my water supply drops below a certain level, I will go to war to secure water supplies for my people. That's not an insignificant issue, and understanding how to capture or how to perhaps reallocate water resources around the world where they're not. Potable water, half the water that we have access to isn't necessarily drinkable in certain parts of the world. So you can't drink it if it may be available to you, and it's not salt water, certainly fresh water, but you can't drink it. So getting water to people that can't drink it is important. Where we're going to grow the food, who's going to grow it, how do you get it to market? Does it make sense to have food that's out of season shipped halfway around the world? What is that going to do? What's the cost of doing that in terms of fertilizers and insecticides and pesticides, and in terms of its collateral impacts? Land use, land rights, it's a perennial issue. It's not solved by any measure around the world. If you go down to Central America, Latin America, or Africa, continent of Africa, land use and land rights are significant issues that continue to foster conflict, and that's not good. That's not good for anybody. So finding a way as a geographer to help move that issue forward would be an exceptionally good career. Illicit trafficking. So the big 4, human trafficking, narcotics, arms, and wildlife. Totaling probably, I don't have the statistics, I'm a little outdated, but we're well north of $300 billion a year, those 4, in terms of the global impact. That's a significant problem. And when you think of all the collateral issues that are involved in that, and they're all related, because all the wildlife parts and all the human trafficking and arms and narcotics are all trafficked along the same routes along the same countries, with pretty much the same actors involved in one way or another. So you think of mafias, you think of gangs, you think of terrorist groups doing bad things and trying to do one thing. So just like 18-wheelers usually never drop off a load and then return home empty, human trafficking and arms and narcotics dealers, they don't like to send somebody back to their home base unless they're bringing something back. So they may bring some people in the United States illegally or through another country. It's not just the United States that suffers from human trafficking, but then they're going to bring back some arms or narcotics to be sold downstream. Then there's the demand side, right? The war on drugs is, categorically not worked, at least in this country. But there is demand side for illicit wildlife parts, whether it's, pangolin scales, whether it's for, tiger paws or bear gall. There's communities around the world that hide behind, ancient remedies, but it's not the case. But yet there's depleting illicit wildlife, and it's really, really big money. And then lastly, intelligence and law enforcement. As uncomfortable as that is for many people, it is a fact of life. It is a way of life. Geography is absolutely important. In fact, if you go back in any history book, you can't fight a war, and you can't avoid fighting a war unless you have mastery of geography. Right. So the intelligence and law enforcement aspects of it, laws exist for a reason, whether you like them or not. There's an application for geography in enforcing laws, or making laws more just, or repealing laws. Certainly, geography can be used in all those areas. And intelligence, if you're interested in getting into the federal government and working in that arena, there's certainly an abundance of careers in that vein. And then, if you need to contact me, I'll be here afterwards. I've got business cards if you want to talk. You can certainly reach me on Twitter too. So, other than that, thank you, and we'll turn it over to Jared.
Thanks, Tony. Close this guy down. I'm also going to take this stool and throw in a chair so I don't stand. I am not a geographer. I studied math and physics and totally stumbled into geography, and I'm fascinated by it. Tony makes the point that things are occurring on the face of the earth at a point in time, and those things change, and I'm fascinated by the technology behind that and how we get to observe and measure and do interesting stuff with it. Interesting stuff can certainly be academic, it can be commercial, political, and I'm just absolutely floored by it. But I want to tell you the story of how I stumbled into geospatial. I didn't know it was a thing. I was basically 17 years old, going to school in Florida, and my girlfriend at the time moved from Florida to Northern Virginia, and her aunt worked at a place called the CIA, and I was like, that is cool. I have no idea what's going on there, not from an intelligence background. My dad's a pediatrician, my mom stayed at home, and I had no military background. I'm like, I love those movies, whatever they were. I want to get involved, hook me up, I want to do something. And so I got a clearance. 17 years old, turning 18, I got a top secret clearance. And I do a co-op, my freshman year in college, in the intelligence community. And it was at a place called NEMA at the time, the National Imaging and Mapping Agency. That later became now what's called NGA, and it's a hyphenated word, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And they said, you're going to be working on stuff that may be our next future satellite. And I'm like, that is phenomenal. Being a math and physics guy, I was like, that's totally up my alley. So I'm going to share a story with you. And out of curiosity, I think, Alan, when you said the people today, is there a mix of computer science people in here at all, or is it mostly geographers? Some computer science? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to talk about that too. So here we go. Anyone know who this is, or what this picture is? How about Gary Powers? Do you know that name?
Pilot.
There you go. All right. So Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet from an airplane called the U-2. Anybody know the U-2 airplane? It's called the Dragon Lady, high altitude airplane, flying over 70,000 feet. I think the exact number is still somewhat sensitive because they're still flying today. It's amazing. 60 years later, there's still, people are doing it. Some people in the Pentagon are trying to squash the program. Other people say absolutely critical and we need it. But Powers was shot down. That's in Moscow, picture of the remnants. And Eisenhower makes a speech at this time, and he says that, you know, the U.S. will no longer do airborne reconnaissance over the Soviet from a U-2. And he said those things as qualifiers. So what did he mean by that? You know, over the Soviet from a U-2. So he had an idea that other airplanes could potentially carry out that reconnaissance mission. And there's a point to this. I mean, there's an intersection with my career that I stumbled in here. I was never an airplane guy either. I kind of had to learn that. This is a short, stubby wing. It's called a B-57 airplane. B for bomber, bomber 57. And the idea was that instead of carrying around heavy bombs in the belly of the aircraft, what if we were to put the same technology, the cameras and the listening equipment that were in the U-2 at the time, put it in this baby, and bump out the wing space, the wingspan, so it can go to higher altitude. And all of a sudden the B-57 turned into something called the RB-57, Reconnaissance B-57. And this aircraft got to 70,000 feet. 20 were modified, a little over 20, 22 were modified, and carried out a reconnaissance mission over the Soviet and also in Vietnam. But the United States Air Force, the USAF on the wing space said, you know, the fleet took a hit. I don't think we need the aircraft anymore. But NASA stepped in at the time, which was weird. So NASA said, you know, we can use it. And they turned the RB-57 into something called the WB-57, Weather Reconnaissance B-57. And here's a shot of the underbelly. It's a picture I took. And you can kind of see here in the black space underneath here that that's where the equipment goes. So if you want to come up with a camera system to remotely sense the Earth and get into Earth observations, you could put it in there. And since it goes to such high altitude, and it's big, it's 123 feet from tip to tip on the wing space, you can put over 5,000 pounds in the belly of the aircraft. 5,000, I mean, that's like, I took Uber on the way over here. That was a Chevy Suburban, you know. You can put one of those puppies in the airplane and take it to see the curvature of the Earth. And why did NASA want it? Well, they were into Earth observations. They wanted to see how the polar ice caps were melting, atmospheric science. There were things called cosmic dust collection, see what all the different cosmic particles were doing in the atmosphere. So here I am, you know, young 20-year-old Jared, and NASA said, how about you jump in the airplane with the astronaut? And this is so you kind of see how I'm stumbling into this a bit. And I said, wait a second, I'm going to get a clearance, I'm going to get a pressure suit, same pressure suit the U-2 guys were wearing, and start doing these research and development missions around the world. That was the game. Again, this is kind of what I started getting into. You know, the Earth is a cool, happening place. And that's where kind of my love affair with geography kind of started. This is a cool picture, by the way. Does anyone know what the Armstrong line is? Have you heard of Armstrong's line? So the question is, why do you need to be in a pressure suit? It turns out when you're flying up really high, your blood can boil. That's what it comes down to. The water in your blood literally will boil. And the only thing that's preventing your blood from boiling is that ugly yellow suit. And so what this picture is showing is that part of the training to get into the aircraft, you go into a pressure chamber and they simulate what the pressure would be like, not the temperature, just the pressure, what the pressure would be like, or the lack of pressure at 70,000 feet. I went to 120,000 feet actually. But Armstrong's line is when water boils at 60,000 feet. And the picture is showing that here I am, if you were not in that, the water in your body wouldn't change in temperature, but all the pressure that's keeping water in liquid state is now being reduced, so there's not that pressure or surface tension on the water, and water is going through the phase change of liquid to gas. So it's a nice little reminder that, thank God, that seal is still good. A little more on the aircraft, these wing tips, when I'm standing up, they go underneath my kneecap. So it's just loaded with fuel. There's about 50,000 pounds of fuel that actually sit on the wings. And old aircraft, the wing tips will actually freeze if you don't transfer that information. And here's my cool little NASA photo. That was kind of, it's now my Twitter picture. What's cool is that I was never a NASA guy, and the story about my career is that I made a business out of it. So I had my first business when I was actually in high school. It was a web design company. And the idea here was that, Jesus, there's this NASA aircraft, and there's all these things we can do for humanitarian aid. Like when there was a disaster in Haiti, it would be really fast to map that from a high altitude, because when you're up high, you have a wide field of view, and you can soak up a lot of information. So that's good, humanitarian aid. Intelligence, and so the idea would be, instead of investing billions of dollars into a next generation satellite, it may make sense to test out the new source or method, new technology, new gizmo, on the $1 million scale. So what we would go off and do is build these sensors that would be 20 years ahead of the time before they became operational satellites. So we would go off and do that. And that was the company. When you're up there, here's a picture. There wasn't an iPhone at the time. This was just a little foot candle picture. But you get to see the curvature of the Earth. You take off at lunchtime, blue skies, and you keep flying until the blue stuff's underneath you, which is absolutely fascinating. Turns out that it takes about 20 minutes to get to 50,000 feet, and then it takes another 45 minutes just to go from 50,000 to 65,000 feet. The air is so thin up there that it takes forever to get that lift going up that way. Here's one. This is Afghanistan. Interesting geography story here. So it turns out in 2005, President Karzai of Afghanistan wanted a mineralogy map of Afghanistan. It turns out if I invest this much money, I'll get this much money back if I just know where the natural resources are. And so he funded a mission that would go there. And the cool thing about Afghanistan is all the natural resources exist at the surface. There are no trees per se that mask that stuff. So you can actually map it. And we started a United States Geological Survey mission in Afghanistan in 2006 and 2007. And we mapped over 90% of the country. We found out, that's what you know, lithium deposits, huge in Afghanistan. Copper deposits. The unfortunate political bend to this is after the U.S. did this for Afghanistan, people on the business side to go in and get the ore out were the Chinese. So the Chinese made it out on the whole deal. But interesting picture, and here in the middle of the night flying. So my little points here, and I think Alan, I kind of followed a template here, which is just a little bit, wanted to explain my story, which is I did it because it was fun. I didn't know what I was really doing at the time, and I just figured it out along the way. I mean, life stories that I'm sure I'm going to be talking about this when I'm much older and grayer about this, but I just followed a passion, and inevitably, if you believe what Tony says, and I do, if everything exists somehow on the face of the earth and changing in time, if you follow a passion, I'm pretty sure it can tie back to geography some way, if that's your thing, and it turned out to be my thing there. Certainly pursuing things that are challenging, and what's really good is, what I found valuable, is that I have a healthy respect for academia. You need to have that educational layer, but you know, there's something to be said for getting out of the classroom or a building and seeing where technology hits the proverbial road. That's where a lot of value happens, is when you get in conversation and say, I totally get what the textbook says, that's good principle, it's good fundamentals, but it's been my experience when I did that the following things happen. Or you didn't think of this thing, and here's my horror story of why that happened. Operational experience, tremendously valuable. And so a little coaching there is that, you know, variety and the breadth of experience is important. So seek opportunities that, you know, are not necessarily stovepipe in academia. So the company at that point, because of the curvature of the Earth, was called Curved Skies. And as of August this year, I was able to sell that company, and I have a new thing. So when Deborah gave the intro, she said there's a new company called Bitvoyant, which was not a remote sensing type of company. It's actually a cyber company. but cyber is such a big vanilla word these days, it's not very specific. So I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about the intersection of what I call geospatial or spatial ideas and cyber or internet observations. And I think that the ties aren't necessarily apparent, but they're relevant. They may spark some ideas for you. I certainly look, this can be a two-way conversation, so ask me some questions along the way here. But I'm going to kind of tease a couple of these ideas out. The beautiful Earth, you know. Certainly, there are more and more satellites per day that are going up, and they are advancing in technology and their ability to describe activity, natural activity and human activity on the surface of the Earth. But when we think about the internet, it's not really spatial. It's not like here's the latitude and here's the longitude. It doesn't seem like it fits. But there are a lot of ideas that I'm going to walk you through that apply, that I've found that having a geospatial background can be applied to things that maybe not be geospatial at the surface level. But the ideas behind them, the toolkit you develop along the way, certainly is relevant. So if you think about the future of spatial tech, I don't have a crystal ball, neither does Tony. Anyone who says they know where it's going, you know, you got to take a healthy grain of salt along the way. But I think that space and time, maybe, people want to have a better understanding of what's happening in X, Y, Z, all three dimensions, and how that dimension changes over time in that activity. The people who can do it at better resolution in space, so if you have a commercial satellite saying, I'm only getting meter-ish or 3-meter pixels, what happens if I get it down to a foot? What happens when I get to centimeters? What decisions can I make that are better now that resolution is getting better? And thanks to technology, that's happening. But one resolution on a Monday may not be very useful if you have to wait a whole other year for another picture. So the frequency in which the Earth is being observed is also increasing. So I think it's a safe generality to say that our Earth observations in spatial, whether it's from a satellite or from a ground, are going to be benefited by technology in imaging or understanding things in X, Y, and Z, long and elevation, and certainly in time, more frequency of collection. The other part too is that I'd say something full spectrum. Does anyone here know what a hyperspectral is about? Yeah, all right. So it turns out the world is even more fascinating outside of human vision. So I'm going to geek out on the physics side for a second. It turns out that the human eye notionally can see from about 400 nanometers to about 800 nanometers. And there's even comical stories that in Vietnam, when we thought that, you know, the Viet Cong weren't seeing us, we had active IR about a little after 800 nanometers. Their human eyes were different than our human eyes, and they could actually see the illumination. So they were just popping us off in the jungle, which is a funny, maybe not so funny story, an unfortunate story, but if you're good at tech. But it turns out that if you go outside of what, you know, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, if you go outside of different wavelengths, you can understand the world differently. This is the notion of, like, what does remote sensing have to do with persistent agriculture, or better agriculture? And you can launch UAVs or satellites or have handheld cameras that look at the infrared signatures from crops to give you an idea of crop assessments and health. So not everything that's occurring is happening within human vision. And that's not just optically, it's also kind of what's happened electromagnetically. What are the electromagnetic signatures that we're putting off? If I use my iPhone, and right now I'm not using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, it's 4G or LTE, but as soon as I put Wi-Fi, something happens interesting on my phone. My phone is silently screaming, am I at home? Is it, you know, Jared's house Wi-Fi? No. Is it at work? No. Geez, I'm in a place that I don't know where I am. And if I even go to the settings area and I check out the Wi-Fi, and I'll do this, you know, and I hit, let's see here, Wi-Fi, and I look at the networks, look at this. Around me, silently screaming, are just, there's actually a lot of signatures. There's only one place on the planet that has these sorts of signatures happening, and that's right here. If I went across the street, some of these things would drop off. So if I think about the invisible, unique signatures that are occurring, there's only one place that's happening, that's right here. And guess what? The information's free. How much did it cost me to figure out what these SSIDs were? Nothing, right? You can passively collect that information and literally fingerprint activity based on those signatures. So when we think about geography, at least for me, it's certainly outside of human vision, but also the different signatures that are occurring. And it's scary. I'll give you, another little technological thing. Does anyone here know what TPMS is? The Tire Pressure Management System. All right, so here's a scary thing, because when you think Big Brother's kind of watching. It turns out, I was floored when I heard this. It turns out that every tire on the road, right now, every tire on the road has a radio inside of it. If you have 4 tires, there are 4 radios in it. And you're thinking, well, why is that? Well, you know when you're driving along, it goes ding, low pressure. How is that happening? It turns out there's a little radio transmission coming out of your tire, going to your dashboard and saying, there's been a pressure change, either too much or too little. And you have to reset that every time. The mechanics do this, and it's called TPMS, Tire Pressure Management System. It's required after 2004 by the US government, called the TREAD Act, T-R-E-A-D, and TREAD, because it's government always has an acronym. But the idea was the roads were unsafe because people don't know the pressure of their cars, or you're wasting too much fuel if you don't have the right pressure in your tires. I tell you this story because just as my phone is screaming Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signatures, all the tires on the road are also screaming. And that means if you want to understand human interaction and behavior, you can also pick up that signature free. All right? And it's not foreign. These ideas aren't foreign. Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom, we shop there, right? You at least browse through there, right? And it turns out they want to know how you're moving within that department store. You know, why is it that we're getting no traffic through men's socks? That's weird. We probably need to put men's socks somewhere different. That information they're picking up because everyone's carrying around a phone in their pocket. When you go to Apple, you know, they're like, sometimes they have this little Apple ID, another unique signature, free to collect. Saying, oh, Mr. Novick, thanks for walking in today. You have an appointment. You know, here you are in your queue. All free, and it's because it's convenient and easy. But the idea of that data is just there. It's there passively. You don't have to actively ping and ask for it. You can be sponges and collect that information. That's a host for a whole lot of analytics you can put out there. Which is my final question, my final hit here. Is like, so the notion of analytics, what we're finding and what everyone would agree in the commercial space, I would even argue on the government side and everywhere, is that if information is relatively free to collect, for the most part, you know, or it's there to be collected, it may cost you instrumentation to collect it, but there's data. If I gave you trillions of events per day, you couldn't make sense of it. Human brain's not good at understanding all the SSIDs in New York. That's tough to do. But the notion of what's the analytical layer, what are the questions that people care about, and how do we code them so they happen automatically? Wouldn't it be interesting that I can understand people's movements based on where their phones are? And that would be an analytic you would develop. So if I think about the future, at least in the near term, it's undoubtedly in analytics. The information's going to be there, but how do we make better decisions on that? Any questions so far? All right. So here's my little teaser on why I think that there's something to be had between geospatial and cyber. So I put geospatial. Being a math guy, you can have a vector with multiple components. It doesn't have to be just X, Y, or Z. So you can have hyperspace. So the notion of spatial things and how they change in time and the intersection with what we call cyber is something. And I'm going to come up with a term here. I just call it, actually, I call it internet observations, but you might have heard of something called internet cartography. I think it's a fascinating field. Right now, we could go to google.com or maps.google.com or OpenStreetMap, whatever you want to use, and I don't have to be in LA to understand how to drive from LA to San Francisco. I just put in starting location, end location, I get a great map, I can even use Street View and other things and understand things along the way. That data exists to do things. Right now, in internet space, if you wanted to ask the question, how does my American Express transaction interact with their cloud providers? you have to kind of go there and do that. There's no map and context. There's no fundamental context, contextual layer to do that on the internet. One of my pet projects that I hope to get more momentum of. I have a lot of ideas. Someone once told me you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything. So it's discipline every day just to focus on a couple of things. But I think there's an absolute need for open access to internet cartography. Just as there's an openstreetmap.org, there should be an openinternetmap.org. So I went off and I bought it. So I've got way too many domain names. But Open Internet Map, that should be a thing. I believe that there should be open access to the way information is flowing around us. Not a crazy idea, right? I mean, not too long ago, it was strange when you said, oh my God, I can see my neighbor's backyard, or I can just spin the globe in Google and point somewhere and zoom in. Crazy, totally crazy. But there's no internet equivalent of that. We can build it. You know, it's there, and there's ways to do it. So this is meant to be a terrible chart for presentation, other than it's complicated and messy. What we do now in my new company, just to kind of go pull this thread a bit, is that I would say, I'm making up a quote here, so you know, the last 10 years of cyber has been about locking down your own castle walls, your own firewalls, and protecting how things are happening on things you own. I really think the next 10 years are going to be about how information is flowing outside of that on things you don't control. So what do I mean? If let's pick a big company, General Motors. General Motors probably has thousands of suppliers and vendors and people that they work with every day. And they probably have new designs for cars in 2020 or 2025. When they trust a vendor with that information, they have no way to secure that data. It's literally, here's another company, I trust you, do a good job, fill out a form and kind of check it. But there's no way to actually have eyes on, just like we have a satellite picture of Walmart parking lots. You know, there's no way to kind of do that. What we do is we're actually mapping. So the reason why I like geography, kind of make it to tie back here a bit, is that even though it's cyber and internet, I'm mapping. I'm not mapping X, Y, and Z and things you can see with your human eye, but I'm passively mapping the way companies and organizations are trading information. And there should be a visual way to explore that. So, as there's an equivalent to the Earth observational market, I certainly believe in an equivalent to an internet observational market. So, the imagery I can use for this one is, again, I'll use a satellite taking a picture of a Walmart parking lot. You know, when satellites were first launched, they might have been for weather, understanding weather and climate, or for government application. But then there were kind of the births of other industries underneath geospatial Earth observational data. One of them was like, could it support hedge funds here in Wall Street? Would it be interesting to take a picture of Walmart's parking lot, all Walmart's parking lots in the Northeast, or in America, and say, are there parking lots more busy on Monday than Tuesday, or the first quarter relative to the second quarter? And it turns out people buy that data. And if they can get ahead of the quarterly earnings calls, maybe there's a gain to be had on the free data. I mean, you can walk around parking lots, an expensive way to do it, but if you could leverage commercial imagery to do it, why not? That's another thing. So, as there are the births of other, I'll call it market segmentation underneath Earth observation, there's segmentation underneath internet observations, and that's kind of what we're focusing on. So the standard questions we ask are, if you're a company, you know, who are you? You know, what are you doing, and where are you? I'll give you a very concrete example. In October of 2015, our company helped with a $9 billion acquisition. It's crazy for me to say. It's our first kind of deal. And there's something called cyber M&A due diligence, cyber merger and acquisition due diligence. And just as there's a world where you do traditional business due diligence, who are the people I'm going to be working with and buying, and what are their things, and there's financial due diligence, what are their profit and loss, and what does your pipeline look like, and what revenue am I buying. There's also now cyber due diligence, and it comes back to mapping, and our mapping data has an outlet there. That's an example. One thing that I really want to hit on, it's another point Tony made. The visualization layer is really important. And it turns out, I believe, the cyber world is starved for geographers. No one seems to think in pictures or how things are changing on the earth, or very few do. It's probably not fair to say that. And I'll give you an example. Right now, if I were to call Tony, I have AT&T, and you may have another provider, maybe it's AT&T. It gets routed a certain way, even though he's right here. The route in which that takes changes second by second, even if we don't move. And it also changes if he goes back to Florida and I'm in Washington, D.C. There are different routes. There are different carriers that you don't know about that are handling your phone call, just as they're handling your email. And the way that gets determined is by a protocol called BGP. Does anyone know what BGP is? It stands for the Border Gateway Protocol. So if you think about a spatial picture of the U.S., there's little pockets of people who own this, and the borders of how they carry information across borders are handled by BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol. And why does this matter? Organizations don't know how their data is moving outside their network, and there's legal and security implications to that. Let's say that I'm a part of the industrial base, critical infrastructure of America. I'm operating at water dams or windmills or some sort. Wouldn't it be interesting that on a Monday, when I'm supposed to be operating a windmill or a portfolio of windmills, that it goes through my location in Texas to maybe Oklahoma to where it needs to go. But on Tuesday, it goes through a different route. Maybe it goes from Texas to Mexico, bank shot off of somewhere different in the country, back to Oklahoma or wherever the windmills are. That can happen outside of your network, and there's no visual way to understand that, or it's very hard to get that data. Since we have it, we're starved for visualization for that type of information. People would get the picture, and you would say, huh, it's interesting that my information flows differently today. And when it flows differently, that means that other countries can do other things with my data, or have insight, or understanding, or understand what we're saying between them. It's a scary thing. So I think visual geography, visual understanding of the geography, cyber and legal, a very interesting part here. And it turns out, same slide, but I did it on purpose. Just as I think the future of geography is kind of hitting these points, I think the same thing's happening with cyber, space and time, better resolution, more signatures. What are the analytics of that information? So my final slide here was kind of how do I pick and what do I do? So I say pick a mountain, and what do I mean by that? At least with my career so far, I didn't let the pay dictate where I was going. I kind of said, I'm going to take that mountain over there, whatever it happens to be. It's a metaphor for your goal. And what are my incremental steps along the way that gets me closer to that mountain? If I take more higher paying jobs or other opportunities, may come off course there a bit. So I think the good imagery is that if it's a walk and your career is a walk there, what is your mountain that you get incrementally closer to? People say fail fast. You know, some people in the military say ready, fire, aim. It's like you should probably aim before you shoot, but maybe that's not a bad thing to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but get that feedback loop faster. Figure out what's working for you and what's not. Get back in the game and keep on going, because it turns out the experiences along the way matter, and they give you a different perception, a different lens, and probably more holistic lens to tackle new problems. And finally, my closing thought is certainly have fun. If you're not enjoying what you're doing and what's going on, you're not going to do it with passion or dedication. You're not going to get over those challenges, not to be too cliche. But it's a drive, it's hard. And if you're not having fun, what are you doing? All right. Thank you, guys. Any questions?
Well, Thanks to all three of our speakers, really appreciated it. And I think we have some time to just, a couple minutes, if anybody had more snacks, and if anybody wants to speak directly to the speakers or anybody else who's here, then we have just some casual conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Are you hiring?
I am hiring. I am. Find people is the hardest part of what we do, so yes, we are hiring.
In DC?
In DC. Our office is in Roslyn. We need help with analytics. You know, we need talented people to, let me put it this way. I feel like we've got this book of recipes, but we know what we want to go off and cook. I just don't have any chefs right now, or talented chefs that want to have fun and do it. So back-end developers, front-end developers, analysts that make sense of it at the end of the day, things that make it visually appealing. And I actually like and enjoy people that don't have the traditional background, because they come up with new ways to see things. And when you do that, the customers and the market responds well to that. They're like, oh, you know, I'm not a internet cyber guy, but I get this picture, I get these colors, and I don't get that insight. So I like the variety. So the long answer to the question is yes, we are. Yep.
What do you think about urban planners? I just saw the email. I just decided
The urban planners. What email?
I just saw the email for this event. And I just
I got you. So
We sent it
I mean, does it
to a
fit?
lot of different.
Oh, I got you.
I mean, does it fit with what?
yeah.
Does
Would an urban planner fit into this field?
Well, I think maybe I'll talk that with Tony. Maybe give the geography answer, and then I'll have a security answer to urban planning.
Yeah, so have you ever heard the term megacities?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what urban planning, I mean, you know, that's a challenge, right? So you're talking about cities the size of Sao Paulo, Beijing, Mexico City, right? So you're not talking, I mean, even New York City, you know, could qualify as a megacity, right? There's a whole host of things that are incumbent upon urban planners to do better jobs with the burgeoning growth of major metropolitan areas, let alone megacities. So absolutely, there's a market and a career path for that. It just depends on what problem that you as a student or professional want to solve. I'll just say this up front, it's not the sexiest career in the world. It's not, but it doesn't have to be. It's critically important to provide housing, water, safety, security, you know, trash, all that to an urban environment. Otherwise, can you contemplate, you know, what an urban environment would be like without all of that? You know, think Mogadishu, think of other places that are significant urban centers that lack those fundamental things that we take for granted. Regardless of, you know, you can complain about trash and traffic and all you want, but, you know, step outside of the United States and then you've got real problems.
And all of those things are increasingly being subjected to data collection and manipulation in sort of smart cities as sort of a way of thinking of it. How much data can you put in and to improve the way in which you do all of those things?
Yeah, there's a colleague of mine, Mitch Sipus. I can write down his name for you. He's kind of at the forefront, the vanguard of kind of urban planning and architecture going forward, rather than a historical kind of traditional conventional way of looking at urban planning. And I've worked with him on a number of things. He's actually, I think he's finishing up his Presidential Innovation Fellow this year, so you know he's got some chops, he's got some credibility to do some things. He spoke last year at the Geography 2050, so I'll give you a plug now. If you're not doing anything Thursday and Friday, come over to Columbia and be part of the Geography 2050 event, focused on environmental sustainability between now and 2050.
Just a question. You started talking like how when you got out of school, you looked around and you saw all these rural GIS specialist positions. You said that you were interested in more of a challenge. How did you put your skills together then to take whatever steps that then you took in your career?
Right, so after I finished at my graduate work in Portland State, you know, I got a job during my graduate work because, you know, the payments were coming due on the student loans and I had to pay rent and put food on the table. So I took a job with a local company that did digitizing and mapping for the USGS and US Forest Service. It was a federal contractor. And they put me on the line, put me in front of a big mapping screen with a mouse, and this is when digitizing, you know, heads up digitizing was fairly new. And they realized that I really sucked at it. And so they promoted me to manager. And that's the story of my life. So, I mean, you know, true story, right? So I love what I do, but I'm not great at doing the minutia of things. So I'm able to talk about geography. I understand geography intimately and all the things at the high level. But in terms of the skill sets, right, nothing that I learned in university necessarily prepared me for what I do today. That doesn't mean that it wasn't without value, because there were certainly things that I learned in college, both undergraduate and graduate. I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, that's just as valuable as figuring out the thing that you want to go do. I don't know if that answers necessarily the question, but I mean, I've been in the commercial industry for 20 plus years, so there's been a lot of, yep, I'm working in this company and I don't want to keep doing that, so I'm going to go find something else that I do. And you know, fortunately in 2000, I started up the company, and from day one, this is exactly what kind of, why I'm getting up in the morning. It was a personal epiphany, not necessarily a design career track.
So you guys both from out of state.
I was born here.
You're born here. All right, cool. So your clients, are they mostly localized? Are they national? And how do you find them?
So my clients are around the world, actually. So some are large Fortune 50 companies that have locations internationally. Some are wholly not domestic. Sometimes they're found by word of mouth. I love that, because they say, this is working for us, you need that too.
That's the best.
That's the best, totally the best. We're kind of lucky because we don't have to be on someone's network to show value. We can kind of say, here's what you look like from the outside, and we just did this before the meeting, you know, and they said, oh my God, we had no idea that that was us. Thank you for that picture. It's like when you showed Google Earth Street View to a company saying, here are all your locations from a satellite. Like, that's cool. What can there are a lot of things I can do with that. So we're lucky because unlike other companies that may have to get the contract to start showing value, we can start showing value before we're even, the client's even there. And that's the benefit to mapping on the outside. So they range from word of mouth, the best, to the cold calls, to the passive stuff we do on the outside to get some traction somewhere.
Yeah, I'm actually the CEO of two companies, so Spatial Networks and another company called Fulcrum, which is an outgrowth of Spatial Networks. We've got customers in 150 countries around the world, so we are global in that way too. And most of our work, at least at Spatial Networks, is by reference, right? So we solve a really hard problem for a customer, and some of them are in the federal space, all the way down to the state and local, to NGOs, to commercial Fortune 100 companies. And they will, if you solve their problem for them, they will gladly introduce you to somebody else that they work with that may be in a competing company that they have the same problem. The ocean is big enough for multiple people. So, as Jared said, and I want to reiterate on that with the passion and having fun is, no one wants to go to do a job that you don't like going to in the morning. It's a fact of life, however, for millions of people. But you've got an opportunity now to figure out that you'll have those jobs, right? Everybody has college jobs that they like to tell stories about 20 years later. But find something that you're truly passionate about and that you enjoy. But that'll the money will take care of itself. I firmly believe that. But you've got to focus on, as a geographer, no matter where you go to work, solving an actual problem. So we see a lot in the industry what we refer to as a hammer looking for a nail, right? So there's a solution going looking for a problem. Silicon Valley is full of those ideas, where it'll be a brand new startup, they'll think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then they fail a year later because the problem didn't actually exist. And we've been fortunate to solve some really hard problems for some pretty special customers, and that has kind of created a bow wave of kind of equity that we we continue to ride today.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? That was more of a business question. Are you curious more about the business answer on this one?
Yeah, I have a degree in geography, a professional experience in marketing, and I'm looking for an opportunity to bring them together as I go back for a master's in spatial stuff.
Yeah.
Well, geomarketing and business geographics is enormous, right? So the quintessential Walmart versus Target, CVS versus Walgreens, you know, the secret to McDonald's success is not selling hamburgers, it's real estate. Finding the best location for the demographic that's gonna buy McDonald's hamburgers is the key to their success. Chick-fil-A's never had a franchise that's ever gone out of business. Why? Not because the food's awesome, it's because they spend a ton of money figuring out where to put that location and how to vet the people that are gonna run that franchise. That's geography. That's quintessential geography.
And then there's the intersection back to the urban planning question. You know, there's, I don't know, the quote of, the only way you can predict the future is to invent it. And so I think, if I think about that with urban planning, I think absolutely Uber is having an effect on the way we plan for cities. The way that I think the millennials are thinking about cars, the need of them, or what they are having an impact. Or you know, you read articles that someday in the future, don't know when, meat might be a luxury item, you know, and we may have to eat seaweed. So there's seaweed farms out on the ocean floating around. And I don't know what profound or long-lasting or non-obvious second or third order effects those things may have. But they definitely will have an impact to the human terrain and geography of the globe. There are other things also, like we're going to give away cars. We're not going to sell cars. Have you heard of this idea before? That cars will be free? So not the luxury cars. Luxury cars, I mean, there's actually like good stuff in the car that won't be free. But the more commodity cars, the idea is, you know, the information on how people use a car might be more valuable than the raw goods of that car itself.
Exactly.
So if they drive by Target and they go to Walmart, or they drive by McDonald's but go to Chick-fil-A, why? How many? Does that vary by geography? Interesting data to have. So here's your car. By the way, we'll know where you are, or not you, but where the car is at all times. But not a bad trade, right? We get that geospatial data.
You do it today with
Right.
Facebook and
Right.
with Instagram.
And so, impact to urban planning. Perhaps if I want to come up with the next new spot, how do I have a conducive environment for business and people? Interesting question, you know, and how does that have staying power? I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not the geographer. I can just ask good questions sometimes, you know. But then how do I target the people? And, but by the way,
For business.
yeah, well, for business, sorry, for business. Right. So, absolutely, again, I don't think we have the answers, but sometimes asking the good questions is sometimes better about that. And you'll be armed to do that. The availability of data and know how to find your demographic and relate to them, very important. I mean, think about opposition research in politics, you know, when people are thinking about voting for someone else, how do I change their vote? I got to figure out a way and a channel to get to them. That's geospatial. You know, if I want to think about how to sell more BMWs, and if they're of this, if they're more males or females of a certain age group, maybe how do I get in the golf ads or in their internet ads? You know, all that stuff. You know, there are plenty of classes on how to do that. The technology is making the capability, and the barrier to entry is getting lower and lower. So it's becoming more easily accessible to do that.
Good question.
I just want to reiterate, Tony mentioned tomorrow and Friday, AGS has a symposium up at Columbia. You are welcome there. And you, are you bringing students?
We have, yeah, in fact, we got the funds to support students to attend. We've got 3 different sponsors and 5 students, I think, responded to us. So
Okay.
I'll be there with 5, and there'll be 5 of us.
So, you know, and we have, this is our 3rd, there will be another one next year, which is about mobility, in fact, I think
Yeah,
so.
not sure.
Keep that in mind. We have journals, we have given out some fellowships, and in fact, to graduate students, a CUNY Graduate Center Geography student, in fact, won one last year, to go to, I believe it's Tanzania, to do her field work on Chinese investments in infrastructure there. Okay, so there are, so keep your eyes out for applications for that, and we encourage we are a membership organization. I think we call it affiliates because our charter says we can't call it members, but we would love to have all of you as members, and you would get to hear from people like this, and it's wonderful for you and
They
for
also
them
have
to-
internships, we've had students
Internships,
interning.
that's right, we have
Very
your
simple.
wonderful students as interns for us.
And we've had our former, I don't know what the job title, the program managers, right now it's Hannah.
Uh-huh.
And her predecessor were both
Right.
former students of
400
ours.
students, absolutely.
Selena.
So we value you, and we hope you value us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Around if you have any other questions.